Chapter 1. The first things a lay follower must thoroughly understand. Affinity with the Dhamma. A person who has sufficient affinity with the Dhamma to read the Buddhist scriptures sees that the truth of the Dhamma is very practical and concrete. It guides people on how to live an ethical life, to practice, and to cultivate the body and mind to escape the miserable, sinking, and suffering condition of human life through one's own self-reliance. Most importantly, it teaches the ability to master life and death at will, and also put an end to the cycle of rebirth. Therefore, when you first come to Buddhism to become a true disciple, you need to thoroughly understand what is true and what is not true in Buddhism. You need to wisely accept what is right and know how to reject what is wrong in Buddhism. Finally, you need to know what deserves respect and what does not deserve respect in Buddhism. Most Buddhist followers today do not revere and respect the true Dhamma of Buddhism. Instead, they often revere the developed teachings of certain sects and always practice those abstract and superstitious teachings, even though such practice produces no real result. If someone boldly states that the developed teachings of those sects were not spoken by the Buddha and are rather the superstitious teachings of Brahmanism, they become furious and try every way to oppose that person, sometimes even using fiercely abusive and stubborn words. When a person who previously knew nothing of the Dhamma and did not understand Buddhism one day has sufficient affinity to read a Buddhist scripture, it is just like the case we once heard from a Buddhist follower. Until now, I had never known the Dhamma. One day, a friend handed me the Surangama Sutra. By reading that sutra, I found the principles of Buddhism so wonderful, so excellent. From then on, I turned my mind toward Buddhism, often went to hear teachings in the temples, and bought more Buddhist books and scriptures to study the path and method of Buddhist practice. The more I read Buddhist scriptures, the more I wanted to leave home and practice. Those are fortunate people with affinity who have read such scriptures as the Surangama Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, the Lotus Sutra, general Buddhist studies, and the entire body of the Agamas, or the Nikayas. By contrast, those who do not yet have sufficient affinity, who have not read Buddhist scriptures, and who do not understand what Buddhism is, view Buddhism as a superstitious religion, and treat the Buddha as a god who protects people and bestows blessings on humankind. At present, most people understand Buddhism through 4 different sects. 1. Pure Land Buddhism turns Buddhism into a superstitious religion of worship, praying, and reciting the Buddha's name for rebirth, like Brahmanism. 2. Zen Buddhism turns Buddhism into Taoism. 3. The consciousness-only school, Yogacara, turns Buddhism into a branch of psychology. 4. Esoteric Buddhism turns Buddhism into a mysterious and sacred religion. In truth, Buddhism is not psychology, not a metaphysical realm like the Pure Land, not the essence of all things, and not some sacred, transcendent, or saintly state. It is simply ordinary life as everyone is living it, except that one has abandoned sensual desire and abandoned unwholesome states. Whoever understands correctly and knows how to live correctly by abandoning sensual desire and abandoning unwholesome states will have a serene, peaceful, and untroubled mind. That person is precisely one who has sufficient affinity with the true Dhamma of Buddhism. Otherwise, that person lacks affinity, encounters false teachings, or has affinity with false teachings, just like the Buddhist follower mentioned above. Not having the affinity to encounter the true Dhamma is still better than having affinity only to encounter the false teachings of non-Buddhist traditions. Encountering the false teachings of non-Buddhist traditions gives rise to clinging to views, which is very difficult to abandon. Human beings are originally bound by ignorance, so whatever teaching they encounter, they believe. They believe blindly, and therefore easily become attached to false teachings. Even when they know that such teachings are not the true teaching of Buddhism, they still find them very difficult to abandon. Therefore, in this world, there are many religions, and every religion has followers. Religions with supernormal powers tempt people even more easily. Thus, whatever teaching has supernormal powers will gather more and more followers, like ants swarming over a lump of sugar. Who would not be fascinated upon hearing of supernormal powers? But supernormal powers are merely a form of illusory power, a hallucination used to deceive people. The true follower of Buddhism. Because their understanding of Buddhism is not deep, but rather shallow and superficial, Buddhist followers can be divided into 5 kinds. 1. Followers who go to the temple to worship, pray for peace, pray for the dead, draw divination lots, tell fortunes, check auspicious and inauspicious dates, worship stars, remove bad luck, and so on. The superstitious follower. 2. Followers who go to the temple to make offerings to the Sangha and hear Dhamma talks and scripture lectures to understand Buddhism. These people are educated, but they lack careful reflection. Whatever teaching they hear, they believe at once. Not knowing whether it is right or wrong according to Buddhism, if it sounds reasonable, they practice it. Thus, they develop clinging to views and argue over winning and losing. The rash follower. 3. Followers who rarely make offerings to the Sangha, rarely bow to the Buddha, and rarely engage in devotional acts, but specialize only in listening to scriptural teachings. They memorize doctrinal meanings and collect many kinds of books and scriptures compiled by scholars. They take those as the standard, then interpret those meanings according to their own private viewpoints, seek out practitioners to argue with and humiliate, and regard themselves as teachers who thoroughly understand the truth of the path. At times, they even act as if they have already attained realization. The arrogant follower. 4. Followers who go to the temple but do not worship the Buddha, do not make offerings to the Sangha, and do not listen to scriptural teachings, but merely use the place to make business connections. The opportunistic follower. 5. Followers who go to the temple to worship the Buddha, make offerings to the Sangha, and hear scriptural teachings to understand and carefully weigh which method is right and which method is wrong, so that they may choose the true method of Buddhism and only then practice. The true follower. Among these 5 kinds of Buddhist followers, only the 5th kind are devout followers of Buddhism, practicing seriously according to the Buddhist teachings. The other 4 kinds are followers who do not understand Buddhism and are influenced by heretical teachings. It is precisely these 4 kinds of followers, especially the superstitious ones, that cause Buddhism to decline. If one is not a disciple of the Buddha, that is one thing. But once one is a disciple of the Buddha, one should have the wisdom to guard and protect Buddhism and prevent heretical teachings from invading it. Yet the opposite is what happens. Disciples of the Buddha end up helping non-Buddhist traditions destroy Buddhism. That is truly heartbreaking. Dear friends, are you not now practicing and praising the teachings of non-Buddhist traditions? When you go to the temple to worship, pray for the dead, pray for peace, worship stars to remove bad luck, consult good and bad dates, and so on, are you doing as the Buddha taught? Every day you sit in meditation and recite the Buddha's name. What liberating result have you gained? Has the mind ended greed, hatred, and delusion? Or do you merely sit cross-legged for 3 or 4 hours and then call that a result? These teachings have turned you into docile sheep. Do you know that? These teachings have turned Buddhism into heretical teachings that are superstitious, backward, unscientific, and illogical. Do you believe our words? It is an obvious truth. Please reflect on it carefully. The true teacher of Buddhism. A person without affinity does not encounter the Dhamma. That person's life drifts along the polluted stream of worldly sensual pleasure, rising and sinking with endless suffering, passing from one life to another without ever ending, like an ant circling the rim of a jar. A person without affinity who does not encounter the Dhamma, but instead encounters false teachings, becomes increasingly inflated with self the more he practices. He often deceives others for fame and gain and commits many evil deeds. It is truly a waste of a lifetime of practice in a human life. A person with affinity who encounters the Dhamma but does not meet a true teacher and does not clearly understand the principle of the true Dhamma of Buddhism, practices according to the interpretations of scholars. This is like an animal gnawing a bone, too wasteful to throw away, yet there is nothing there when one keeps chewing. A person with affinity and a determined mind to practice Buddhism, to escape worldly suffering, but who instead encounters the developed non-Buddhist scriptures compiled by scholars of the past and present, ends up practicing in a half-dead state without any real result. His worldly life is not a true worldly life, and his religious life is not a true religious life. To make matters clear regarding Buddhist monastics at present, we can divide them into 6 kinds. 1. Bhikkhus who specialize in worship, chanting, and reciting verses in ritual services. These bhikkhus study little doctrine. The temple is their place of livelihood, like a family home. They have wives and children and engage in worldly occupations just like a secular family: farming, gardening, raising pigs, chickens, goats, cows, and so on. If anyone invites them to perform worship, chanting, prayers for the dead, or prayers for peace, they set clear prices for their services. 2. Bhikkhus who specialize in worship, chanting, prayers for the dead, prayers for peace, organizing ceremonies, pilgrimages, charitable activities, and so on. These bhikkhus do not have wives or children, and they have doctrinal education and learning. When they chant at funerals, they do not charge fees, but they do accept offerings of the 4 requisites. The temple is a place where superstitious Buddhist followers gather all day long. 3. Bhikkhus who specialize in studying doctrine, doing organizational work, lecturing, translating, and compiling scriptures and books. These bhikkhus have high education and broad Buddhist knowledge, but they do not actually practice. They belong to the leadership level of the Buddhist establishment. 4. Bhikkhus who both practice and preach the scriptures of Zen Buddhism, esoteric Buddhism, and Pure Land Buddhism to followers according to their own interpretations. These bhikkhus follow the bodhisattva path and practice bodhisattva conduct. The above 4 kinds of bhikkhus belong to Mahayana Buddhism. 5. Bhikkhus who specialize in eating the flesh of living beings. These are Theravada monks who follow the original Buddhist scriptures, but because they have been influenced by the interpretations of highly educated scholars, they often break the precepts, fail to live the holy life, and therefore misunderstand the Buddha's teachings. They have become unwholesome spiritual friends, have lost the seed of compassion, departed from the seed of the true Dhamma, and often argue to justify eating the flesh of living beings, saying, "Eat if one has not seen, not heard, and not suspected." 6. Bhikkhus who build huts, hermitages, or small private dwellings to practice alone. These are negative, world-weary practitioners who seek only personal peace. They think that practicing like this is liberation, but do not realize that they are fleeing life and chasing after the desire for a quiet existence. These, then, are the 6 kinds of bhikkhus. A. If you choose the first kind as your teacher, then you are following a superstitious, ritualistic Buddhism, heavily influenced by folk customs and traditions. Most of these bhikkhus break and violate the precepts, never live according to virtuous conduct, and are merely shaven-headed lay followers. B. If you choose the second kind as your teacher, then you are following a Buddhism belonging to Brahmanism and cultivating merit with outflows. C. If you choose the third kind as your teacher, then you are following a Buddhism of fame and gain. D. If you choose the fourth kind as your teacher, then you are following Zen Buddhism, esoteric Buddhism, or Pure Land Buddhism. These methods are like chewing an iron pellet. One can neither swallow it nor spit it out. E. If you choose the fifth kind as your teacher, then you are following Theravada Buddhism, becoming an unwholesome spiritual friend, losing the mind of compassion, and turning away from the path of liberation. F. If you choose the sixth kind as your teacher, then you are following a negative, world-escaping Buddhism. Such a life of practice goes nowhere. There is effort, but no benefit. Since Buddhism has these 6 kinds of monastics, if you do not accept them as your teacher, then whom will you accept? We would like to introduce to you a true teacher of Buddhism so that you do not have to search far and so that you will not be deceived by false, non-Buddhist teachers. That true teacher is the Buddha's Dhamma and precepts. In the past, the Buddha himself relied on this Dhamma and these precepts to attain the path. Therefore, when he attained realization, he knelt down, paid homage to this Dhamma, and honored it as his teacher. Then, when he entered Nibbana, he left this instruction. After I enter Nibbana, bhikkhus, take my Dhamma and precepts as your teacher, as your firm refuge in practice. We would also like to introduce the scriptures that truly belong to Buddhism, so that you do not mistake false scriptures for genuine ones. 1. The 4 Agagamas. 2. The 5 Nikayas. Although the 4 Agagamas and the 5 Nikayas are the original Buddhist scriptures, the patriarchs made many additions and omissions within them. Especially in the Agamas, the patriarchs translated in ways that distorted the Buddha's meaning, and they even composed connecting scriptures between the lesser vehicle and the great vehicle. Therefore, when studying these scriptures, Buddhist followers should not believe them entirely, but should remember what the Buddha taught. Kalamas 1. Do not believe because of oral reports. 2. Do not believe because of tradition. 3. Do not believe because of hearsay. 4. Do not believe because it is handed down in Scripture. 5. Do not believe because of metaphysical reasoning. 6. Do not believe because it fits a fixed standpoint. 7. Do not believe because of a superficial evaluation of data. 8. Do not believe because it agrees with your own bias. 9. Do not believe because it comes from an authoritative source. 10. Do not believe because an ascetic is your teacher. But, Kalamas, when you yourselves know clearly, these things are unwholesome, these things are blameworthy, these things are criticized by the wise. These things, if practiced and adopted, lead to misery and suffering. Then, Kalamas, you should abandon them and not follow them. These teachings of the Buddha are reminders and warnings to his disciples not to believe too quickly and thus be deceived by non-Buddhist teachings disguised as Buddhism. From these teachings, we can conclude that when entering any religion, we must be even more cautious and careful. We should not believe blindly, but must choose the true Dhamma. that teaches the morality of being truly human and noble. For it is precisely the morality of being truly human and noble that does not cause suffering to oneself, to others, or to any living being. Buddhism is a religion of self-reliance. Anyone who wishes to follow the true path of Buddhist practice must clearly understand that human life, from birth to death, is entirely a life of suffering. Suffering exactly as it truly is. There is suffering because body and mind are full of the defilements of greed, hatred, and delusion. Suffering because the people around us do not think alike. Suffering because circumstances are sometimes favorable and sometimes adverse. Suffering because food and clothing require hardship and toil. Only when we see correctly and know correctly that life is suffering in this way do we dare choose the Buddhist path of practice. If we do not see life as truly suffering, but instead still see it as happiness, peace, and pleasure, then we should not choose the Buddhist path of practice. Why is that? Because the path of Buddhist practice goes against the ordinary current of human life. Moreover, the path of Buddhist practice is a path that requires self-reliance, using one's own strength, always cultivating the body and mind, and training oneself to abandon the mind states full of craving and the unwholesome states surrounding one. In order to abandon them, one must be courageous, firm, persevering, enduring, patient, and also possess enough determination to boldly cut off bad habits and faults. It is not about entering a Buddha hall to worship, pray, beg, and rely on the external power of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas for protection, support, rescue from suffering and danger, release from pain, calamity, illness, or for rays of light to guide the souls of the dead to the pure land of the West. Nor is Buddhist practice about chanting sutras, reciting the Buddha's name, reciting mantras, sitting in meditation, training in charms and incantations in order to gain supernormal powers and magical arts, or seeking rebirth in the Pure Land, or Nibbana, through the external power and majestic power of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. If one wants to practice Buddhism to escape the suffering of human life, one must use one's own self-reliance, not the external power of others, as taught in the developed non-Buddhist scriptures. When we read the original Buddhist scriptures, we see that the Buddha taught practice through methods of self-reliance. Almost nowhere did he teach a method of seeking external power. Only developed non-Buddhist scriptures teach practice through external power, such as reciting the Buddha's name for rebirth. At this point, some may ask us, does not the Buddha in the original Buddhist scriptures teach the 4 unshakable confidences? Is not the method of the 4 unshakable confidences the recollection of the Buddha, recollection of the Dhamma, recollection of the Sangha, and recollection of virtue? Dear Buddhist followers, the Buddha taught that recollection of the Buddha means living like the Buddha, not reciting the Buddha's name. Recollection of the Dhamma means living according to the Dhamma and practicing according to the Dhamma, not chanting sutras. Recollection of the Sangha means living in harmony like the Sangha, without opposing one another, not making offerings, bowing to monks, and venerating monks to seek blessings. Recollection of virtue means living according to the holy life, never violating the precepts, and never committing even the slightest fault, not gathering on the 30th day and the full moon to recite the precepts. When the scholars heard the teachings on recollection of the Buddha, recollection of the Dhamma, recollection of the Sangha, and recollection of virtue, they interpreted them according to mere words. They explained recollection as silently reciting in the mind phrases such as "Homage to the original teacher Sakyamuni Buddha," or "Homage to the worthy one, the fully enlightened one, perfect in true knowledge and conduct." Recollection in that way has no real meaning and brings no liberation. Here, the Buddha taught that recollection means contemplating the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, and virtue, so that we thoroughly penetrate how the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, and virtue embody liberation, so that we may follow them and live and practice in accordance with the Buddha, with the Dhamma, with the noble Sangha, and with the precepts. Only with such understanding and practice is there true liberation. If one merely recites the Buddha's name, chants sutras, makes offerings of the 4 requisites, bows to monks, and recites the precepts, then even if one does recollection of the Buddha, recollection of the Dhamma, recollection of the Sangha, and recollection of virtue like that for countless lives, one will not gain even the slightest liberation. People have been mistaken. They think that such recollection is for one-pointedness of mind without distraction, meaning no wandering thoughts intrude, and there remains only a single phrase of reciting the Buddha's name, and thus one will gain rebirth in the Pure Land. That is the understanding according to Pure Land Buddhism. According to Zen Buddhism, however, one-pointedness of mind without distraction means having neither wholesome thoughts nor unwholesome thoughts. Having neither wholesome thoughts nor unwholesome thoughts is taken to be meditative concentration, to be Buddha nature. But all such practice is entirely wrong. That one-pointedness of mind without distraction will make you fall into the illusory world of the aggregate of perception. This is the maze of heretical teachings. In your practice, you must be very cautious of that dangerous tiger's den. If you practice to that point, beware. Nervous disorder may arise and endanger your life, turning you into a mad person. A newcomer entering Buddhism stands bewildered before the vast mass of developed Buddhist scriptures. There are scriptures which, when we read them, show only practices that depend on external power for support on the path to liberation, such as the Sutra of Infinite Light, the Amitabha Sutra, the Queen Wen Sutra, the Lotus Sutra, and so on. All these scriptures have weakened the practitioner's resolve, drained away energy, and turned Buddhism into a religion of external power, a religion of superstition, so that later generations of practitioners know only how to depend on others. Because of such wrong practice, no one in Buddhism attains realization any longer. They argue that beginners must chant sutras, bow in repentance, recite the Buddha's name, bow to the great names of the Buddhas, and seek external power, while long-time practitioners must rely on themselves to sit in meditation and practice mindfulness of breathing. Anyone who understands Buddhism in that way understands nothing of Buddhism at all. That is understanding according to developed Buddhism. For beginners, such as lay followers newly entering the path, the Buddha taught as the first lesson in self-reliant practice that one must abandon the 6 evil occupations by which one makes one's living each day. That is, if we want to follow Buddhism and practice, we must change from evil livelihoods to wholesome livelihoods. Through the discourse on abandoning the 6 evil occupations, we can clearly see the self-reliance of Buddhism right from the beginning. When we first step onto the path, we hear the Buddha teach, "Understand what must be understood, abandon what must be abandoned, practice what must be practiced, cultivate what must be cultivated." None of these things can be done through the external power of others. Buddhism is a religion built upon wholesome states. All unwholesome states must be removed and abandoned. By removing unwholesome states and developing wholesome states, life gains liberation, peace, and happiness for oneself and for others. Removing unwholesome states can only be done through self-reliance. There can be no external power in this. Evil deeds must be abandoned by oneself. One cannot beg someone else to do it for oneself. For example, if you steal, can you ask someone else to help you stop stealing? Impossible. You must know for yourself that stealing is an evil deed that brings sorrow to others, and so you should abandon it. The same is true of the 6 evil occupations. You cannot ask the Buddhas to help you abandon those evil occupations. You must abandon them through your own self-reliance and no longer engage in them. Through this, we can know clearly that Buddhism is the path of self-reliance. Scriptures of external power are not the scriptures of Buddhism. Buddhism sees life through the eyes of cause and effect. Cause and effect can be cut off only through self-reliance. Even if there were some almighty being, it could not help us in this matter. Therefore, Buddhism is a religion which is non-religious, a religion without any almighty sacred being who rescues beings from suffering, a religion in which human beings, through self-reliance, save themselves from every form of suffering. Therefore, Buddhism is also called the path of solitary dwelling, walking alone, and acting alone. Buddhism is also called the humanistic ethics of cause and effect, living without bringing suffering to oneself, to others, and to all living beings.